Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Fast Mayday, what's your location? Get the hell out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, baby. Water in that 2.5 inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5 inch line. To the rope, to the rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Hello again from the Emergency Traffic Podcast. This is episode 59 of season 3. I am Paul, your producer and host. This episode will be the only episode this month, as I got a little behind as I was out of the country in the UK and the States for a few weeks earlier this month. This week's episode, I am joined by Denis and Doug. We discuss a few current events in the fire service, and then we explore and learn about the 2015 double line-of-duty death in Kansas City from a collapse of a large mixed-use occupancy. All the information in this report comes from the NIOSH report about this incident. So here we go. I'll bring in Denis and Doug. Welcome, Doug and Denis. How are you guys doing today?
Marvelous. If I was doing any better, I'd be worth $1 million.
Aha. Perfect.
Well, I'm doing pretty good. I don't know if I'm $1 million, but I'm okay.
Good.
I think I was saying that I wasn't either.
How was your big European adventure?
It was good. It was enjoyable. It was very different. 2 weeks on an airboat might be a little too long. Maybe 7 days would have been a better choice, but it kind of got to be Groundhog Day after a while because you had to get up and get moving every day to make the loop. We picked too far a loop. We did 110 miles and 94 locks in 2 weeks.
All the photos I saw were pictures of Mavis walking and Mavis opening the lock.
That's right.
Mavis walking and Mavis opening the lock.
She walked a lot, and I walked as well. So
that's good.
But anyway, the lock. It was good exercise. We both lost weight, so it was good exercise. We walked a lot, and it was very interesting to see Britain and the little towns and the canals. And I mean, these locks. You know, you go in the lock, and the inscription on the wall of the lock is 1790, right? And they're still there, still working. Yeah, so that was interesting.
Are you sure you didn't lose weight from whatever you contracted from going swimming?
Yeah, from going in the canal to get my phone that I dropped in the canal. Yeah, thank you for sharing that with all the listeners. That's awesome. Oh, well, I got it. I could pick my phone up with my feet. That's pretty good, I thought.
Yeah.
1 foot. Yeah. Okay. Let's see. What's new in the fire service these days? The thing I had was a couple of Tesla fires recently with multiple fatalities. Toronto had 1, 4 died, 1 was saved. And then there was another one somewhere else in North America. Crashed into a concrete barrier, middle of the night kind of thing. Yeah. So not sure what happened there.
I just saw this morning in the news that there was I think it was either the 5th or 6th death in New York City attributed to a lithium-ion battery fire. And it's down from 12 last year, apparently, at this time. But still, it's the leading cause of fire deaths in New York, and could possibly be typical for other, metro areas.
And these are mostly like scooters and e-bikes and stuff that have been modified or, replacement batteries and stuff.
Yeah, or more reliably, the problem is that they're stored in the egress from the apartment. I mean,
the big problem, yeah.
My mom had a mobility device, and the only place you could put it pretty much was in the entry hall coming in the apartment, right? So if there was ever an issue with it, you weren't getting out.
That simple. That's a huge issue.
Got to think about that.
Yep. There was a high-rise fire in Vancouver just this week on I don't know what floor it was. It was fairly high up there.
Too high to jump.
I want to say the 15th, but I could be guessing. But 15's in my head for some reason. Yeah,
could be something like that.
So it was that 100-meter Bronto. That's what you needed.
Exactly, Toronto.
It was either in the shop or parked too far away.
Or no streets.
Because it takes forever to get there. Yeah.
All the way from Toronto, it would take a long time.
Yeah, it would.
Well, the bigger question is, where's their club that they actually own?
Never mind
their Bronto.
It's never been in service, I heard.
You think it's a long time to respond from Toronto to Vancouver? How about from France to Vancouver? Because the truck has to keep going back.
It's there apparently. I saw it on a picture of it on a float.
It's
Yeah.
been, I think it's been back to France 2 or 3 times already.
I
Never
don't
been to
know.
one call yet. It's 5 years
I
old.
don't know. Your
Bada
friend's going
bing.
to slam you if he listens to our podcast. London, they the big change there, of course, they are copying, I think it's Edinburgh or Glasgow, where they will not respond any apparatus to automatic alarms from commercial structures. So if they get a business that has an automatic alarm in the daytime, they will not respond. They're waiting for a phone call. So they're trying to educate everybody that if there's a fire in a commercial business, they're not going to respond to the automatic alarm. You have to call them, and so they're trying to reduce their automatic alarm daytime responses.
Yeah, I'm thinking actually it's more focused than that. They're trying to reduce their false alarms.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Because daytime, occupied building, you could certainly, there's lots of reasons why the alarm system might be going off when there's no actual emergency.
Yeah, cleaning, painting, maintenance, whatever. Yep,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah, a lot of those types of reasons. I know it always used to be an issue, and I know in my last department we had modified response to auto alarms. First in would go hot, the other ones wouldn't. Unless there was some confirmation like a backup phone call or uh, you know visible signs of an incident or whatever the case may be. Just to
Yeah,
reduce the possibilities of to reduce the response risks, right? Because
yep.
if you're running
Accidents.
red lights and sirens through a city, you're busting intersections and or forcing the lights to change unexpectedly and pushing people off the road. Not literally but figuratively, and it can cause incidents, right? And if you get all the way there or you're halfway there, and then you find out it's nothing and you turn all your lights off, um, it's it raises questions amongst the population as to why you're putting them at risk for no reason.
For sure. Yep, no, I agree 100%. And I like that. Send the first one hot and the rest cold idea. These guys are going one step further. They don't go at all unless you phone them. And they've
Yeah,
had all kinds of media campaigns trying to educate the public because
yeah. But if you're a firefighter in the rig, hot or cold, you should be ready.
yes, exactly. Been quite a few. Speaking of reducing the risk of the response, is multiple apparatus wrecks lately. There's been quite a few. There was a commercial tanker that rolled over somewhere in rural Kentucky, I think. The driver did survive, but seriously injured. And there's been a whole bunch of multiple apparatus wrecks lately. So we need to be careful when we're driving for sure.
Do we need to talk about the color of those trucks, or?
No, we got to split. Doug's not here to defend himself. He ducked out for a minute. So, of course, most of them were red in the pictures I saw. They were mostly red apparatus. Of course, we all know, based on the studies, numerous studies, that high vis lime yellow apparatus are twice as safe as red apparatus, even with reflective striping and emergency lighting. And you can revisit that on one of our tailboard talks. I can't remember which one it is right now. Anyway. Vancouver, they were displaying their new PFAS-free PPE. So they bought some new turnout gear, and there's some places in the States too that are buying new turnout gear that does not have any polyfluoride treatment on the turnout gear.
So what's the difference? I wonder. I mean, it can't just be the that treatment that they put on the PFAS treatment, right? There's got to be. Is it still Nomex? Is it still Kevlar?
I don't know
As a base
anything about
material?
it.
Yeah.
I don't know anything about it. And the standards and stuff, that's all something that's kind of coming out. I've only seen two departments that have said they've received some. So, and then Doug was talking before about Charlotte. Was it Charlotte? Which Charlotte? I'm not sure. Had a mayday last week. They had a building collapse and declared a mayday, and the rapid intervention team actually saved the guy and got him out. So that was a really good save there. That rapid intervention and command and everything else worked,
Right.
which was good.
So RID only works, of course, if it's adequately staffed, adequately equipped, it's in the right place, and you've practiced. And
Exactly.
even then, you need a lot of things going your way to make it work.
Yes,
So it's
absolutely.
tough. I remember one time we were doing some drills with our dedicated rescue team, and I think in one of the drills I was playing the victim, and they were trying to get me out, and there was only like room for a couple of guys to access you, and they just absolutely could not get me out. And I'm not a 200-pound heavyweight, so they had a lot of troubles getting me out. And so I know even from, my own experiences with being on a RIT team that it's very, very difficult.
Yeah, I know we did a bunch of RIT drills here in Lacombe years ago when Doug and I were on the department from a basement of an old house, and yeah, it was a real challenge to get to people and get them out, and carry them up the stairs, etc., etc. Yeah, so this week's episode is from Kansas City, Missouri, October 12th of 2015. This information that we're going to talk about is all from the NIOSH report that was published.
So 9 years ago, eh?
Yep. A 39-year-old firefighter from Pumper 10 and a 43-year-old firefighter from Truck 2 died due to a structural collapse during a fire in a multi-occupancy structure. The Kansas City Fire Department at the time consisted of 940 uniformed officers, 326 emergency medical services personnel, and 90 civilian employees. The department protects a population of 470,000 people within a 318 square mile area, provides EMS and transport services, fire protection, tech rescue, hazmat from 34 fire stations, which are organized into 7 battalions. The fire department also staffs a fire station with 3 aircraft rescue firefighting units at the city's international airport. The uniformed members of the department are organized into 3 bureaus that include emergency operations, technical services, and systems support. They respond to approximately 110,000 emergency calls per year. This was back in 2015. The Operations Bureau consists of 3 platoons, which work a 24-48 work schedule and a 49.5-hour work week with a Kelly day every 9 working days to bump up their time off. The daily staffing of each shift is 270 members. The Operations Bureau also operates 10 advanced life support pumper companies, 24 basic life support pumper companies, 12 truck companies, heavy rescue companies, 3 heavy rescues, 2 hazmats, 3 airport ARF trucks, 27 ALS medic units, and 7 battalion chiefs. So this is a big agency.
Yeah, good sized department, a lot of resources. I'm going to talk a little bit here about the training and experience of the department and of the members involved in the fatalities. So anyway, the State of Missouri Department of Public Safety, which is part of the Office of the State Fire Marshal, oversees firefighter training and certification through their Division of Fire Safety Training and Certification Unit. This unit develops, provides, and oversees training curriculum used regionally for firefighters, for fire investigators, fire inspectors, fire officers, fire service instructors, as well as emergency responders dealing with hazardous materials, so hazmat responders. Although certification is not mandatory in the state of Missouri, referring to Pro Board and whatnot, the Division of Fire Safety has issued more than 71,000 certifications at various levels to more than 28,000 individuals. So that would be statewide. The Division of Fire Safety is accredited by IFSAC and Pro Board. So the state is actually, the responsible party for where you'd go if you want to get certified.
Yeah, so, it's like that here too in Alberta.
Yeah. So Pro Board is mostly deals with certifications to NFPA standards, and IFSAC's a little broader than that. It includes NFPA standards, but it can also include other standards that are more industry standard, courses through university and stuff like that. So the Division of Fire Safety strictly adheres to the testing requirements of both of those organizations, IFSAC and Pro Board. Candidates must meet the prerequisite and requisite knowledge and skills as required by the NFP standards, such as NFPA 1001, which is a standard for firefighter professional qualifications for firefighter level 1, which is entry level, and firefighter 2. Candidates must also complete and pass a required training program that meets the applicable NFPA standard. So that's for candidates who are applying for certification. A candidate is allowed to challenge the written and practical certification exams, and this is based upon their previous education, training, and experience of the candidate. So you can get your training and experience elsewhere and then come to the State Division of Fire Safety and do your practicums and exams there. Anyway, upon the completion of a recruit school, and this recruit has the following certifications: NFPA 1001. So we're back to Kansas City Department here now. So upon the completion of the recruit school, recruit has the following certifications: NFPA 1001, which we just talked about, which is the standard professional qualifications. Then they have NFPA 472, which is the standard for competence of responders to hazmat materials at awareness and operations. Then they're part of the National Registry for Emergency Medical Technicians, so EMT Basic. And they have a probationary period of 18 months, which is longer than normal, I think, Paul. Usually, most of the contracts I'm aware of dealt with were 12 months.
Yeah,
so
that is a little longer.
Yeah.
Maybe it's 6 months in school and then 12 months
They
on the
don't
job.
clarify here, so I don't know. It would take a while to get through the training, that's for sure. So very likely that is the case. It's up like 12 months on the job. Anyway, when the probationary period is completed, a firefighter is assigned to a floating firefighter position. And we don't mean water rescue there. It means he doesn't have a permanent assignment in his station. What are you laughing at, Paul?
I was thinking exactly that when you said it.
The firefighter is detailed daily to a vacant assignment to meet staffing needs. So for the first 18 months, they could be driving all over the city in the station one day, next shift in the next station, a different station. So the firefighter has several methods of conducting annual continuing education and training for all of its members. These programs include Back to Basics, which is a good thing in my mind, and International Association of Firefighters Fireground Survival programs. So two good programs, I would say.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, they also do annual training on EMS hands-on skills. They also likely run a lot of EMS calls too, and training on company level hot wash of an incident and how to, in other words, how to get the information of what happened and lessons learned out right away. So the department has no requirements for annual live fire training.
Which is kind of the outlier there. A lot of big departments that they kind of require at least one shift, if you will, at the training academy redoing live fire. I wanted to add something to that fireground survival program. I've taken that program, and one of the a firefighter that we know, Doug, you and I know, I believe Lionel Carruthers, I think is his name, who was caught in a flashover rapid fire event in Winnipeg and saved himself and another firefighter. He credited, in part anyway, that training for giving him the knowledge and the calmness to rescue himself.
And the confidence.
He tried to get out, and he thought of that training, and he calmed down, and he found the window, and he couldn't get through the window initially when he tried to get out, and he remembered that program had told him how to loosen the straps on his BA so he could fit through, sideways and stuff like that. So he actually credited that program with saving his life. So I just thought that was worth sharing. We've tried to get Lionel to guest star on the podcast with us for that event that happened in Winnipeg, but that hasn't worked out yet so far for us, but kind of interesting that way.
I know a lot of departments do that type of training, but maybe not nearly as well as this particular program.
Mm-hmm.
So testing and certification for the fire department includes training and certification for fire apparatus operators, captains, battalion chiefs, and right up to the deputy chief level. The requirements for designation for the position of fire apparatus operator includes the requirement to be a senior firefighter, completion of the workout of classification for fire apparatus operator. So I'm not sure exactly what the workout of classification means, but I think it's on-the-job experience, basically is what they're referring to there. And the fire apparatus operators course, you got to have a specific course. Then you're going to write exams, and then you got to go through practical evolutions, which I presume you need to do well at, for a pumper and or truck, which could either be a platform or a tiller. And the position of fire apparatus operator is a promotion done by certification, as mentioned above, and is designated. So it's not a first-class firefighter, it's a step up from a first-class firefighter. A senior firefighter can accept or decline this appointment. So he doesn't have to be an operator if he doesn't want to. The senior firefighter must be fire apparatus operator qualified by their fire academy prior to appointment to the position. Presumably then when he's doing a workout of classification, he's under the supervision of somebody else who's supervised or is certified. I'm assuming that it doesn't say that here. So the firefighter that was assigned to Pumper 10 was hired in July 1st of 2002. So he had, 13 years experience? Mm-hmm. He successfully completed recruit training in the department's fire academy in November 2002. Upon completion of recruit school, the firefighter received certification in NFPA 1001, which is the qualifications, and 472 standard of competency for hazmat responses. awareness level, operations level, and he was an EMT basic, EMTB. He maintained his EMTB with continuing education through monthly training mandates. Other training certifications included IS 100, which is Introduction to the Incident Command
ICS.
System. Yeah. I'm sorry, it should be ICS 100. My apologies. In September of 2008, the firefighter was certified as a fire apparatus operator to act out of class as a fire apparatus operator. The fire apparatus operator from Truck 2 was hired May 1st, 1998, so 17 years on the job. In August of 98, he successfully completed recruit school at the department's fire academy, so that's in 98. Upon completion of recruit school, the firefighter received his NFPA 1001, NFPA 472 competency, so that's as a firefighter and as a hazmat responder. And he was an EMTB also, again maintaining his qualifications through monthly training mandates. In 2012, August of 2012, he was promoted to apparatus operator also, and he had successfully completed written and practical examinations. The incident commander at the time of this incident was hired by the fire department in 1985, so 30 years experience. He was promoted to deputy chief in June of 2015. So he was the deputy chief who was in charge of this incident and was assigned to B shift. The incident commander was working a trade with the C shift deputy chief on the day of this incident. So he would have normally been working C shift, but on this particular day he was working B. They'd swapped.
Okay, we're going to talk about some building construction now. The earliest city records show that this building was erected in 1925. The building was a 3-story Type 3 ordinary construction with 5 commercial spaces on the first floor. The measurements of this building were 216 feet by 64 feet, which is 13,825 square feet per floor, which equals 41,472 total square feet. 8 apartments were located on the second floor and 8 apartments were located on the third floor. The structure did not contain a sprinkler system or a centrally monitored fire alarm system. Several of the apartments on the second and third floor contained single station smoke detectors, according to the deputy chief of the fire prevention office. The building was constructed of Type 3 ordinary construction and built on grade with a concrete floor slab. The 3-story building had masonry bearing walls located on the Bravo side and the Delta side. The infill non-bearing masonry walls were on the north side, which was the Charlie side, and the south side, which was the Alpha side of the building. The building did not have a basement or cellar. Sited on a city block, the building was accessible on all 4 sides and had attached exposure structure of a single-use occupancy on the Alpha Bravo corner. There was a building exposure, which was a grocery store across the alley on the Delta side. The rear entrance, which was the Charlie side or north side to the nail salon, was bricked over. Companies had no access to the rear of the nail salon, which required companies only to use the Alpha side to access. A dominant and unique feature of this building was the incorporation of hollow building tile construction with a full face brick veneer. This feature was used in the design and assembly of the primary masonry bearing walls located on the east side or Delta side and the west side, Bravo side of the building that provided a primary structural support to the building enclosure, which is a perimeter wall system. With this type of construction, it is much more prevalent to find multiple Wythe course, full width brick bearing walls than in incorporating hollow building tile units.
Yeah, so these bricks were like double wide brick walls, multiple width bricks. It was really weird that the bearing walls was only the end walls. The front and the back were not weight bearing. It's just the 2 sides, if you will, Bravo and Delta.
Yeah, that's not unusual, Paul, because your floor joists and everything run side to side in those buildings, which is a narrow dimension, right?
Yeah,
so
I guess
basically your front wall and your rear wall are essentially curtain walls. They're just there to keep the weather out.
Mm-hmm.
They don't support anything, except for themselves.
Right.
And so I don't know if you guys are all that familiar with this. this tile, hollow wall tile they're talking about. But this is a reddish material. It looks a bit like brick until you look at it. And it used to be pretty common. You'd see it, and it's not brick dimensioned. It's much bigger than that. And sometimes it's got a ribbed face on it. And you'll sometimes see that on the interior of buildings. If you're looking at them, you'll see the finished wall. It's not finished. You'll see these. And so then you know you may have brick on the outside and this material on the inside. And this material is much more fragile. Like you could take a hammer and beat a hole in it, no problem, where you'd have a lot more work to do with the brick. So that's what they're telling you here is that if it had been brick, there would have been multiple widths of brick in this wall, whereas this here was just these one width of these large tiles laying in there. So they're larger and faster. They sometimes used to call this some type of a more speedy construction and less costly. I think that's why
because
it was
there's
used.
more of them. Yeah, they're
Well, you
bigger.
use
I mean, because they're
yeah, you
bigger.
use fewer than you would of bricks,
Yeah.
and they're messily mortared. You'll see them. It's kind of a mess in there. So anyway, that's just been my experience at seeing these things in older buildings.
The perimeter wall construction features. The exterior walls were constructed as outlined below. Alpha side, the 3-story front of the structure was an unreinforced masonry non-load bearing wall constructed with a full face brick veneer construction. The entire facade incorporated a combination steel, single or dual beam, and a steel lintel assembly to allow for the transfer of structural loads from the building face across the expansive horizontal storefront openings. Also incorporated were a series of small tubular or round design cast iron or rolled steel columns evident in the storefront windows. The lower street level exhibited typical storefront framing and glazing with dominant transom treatment above the street side storefronts. Bravo side was a shared wall on the first floor with an additional building, which is a financial loans place. This building was not part of this report. The Bravo side wall was masonry bearing hollow clay block with unreinforced construction with full face brick veneer construction. The Charlie side had several characteristics. Usually, this side of the structure looked like 2 stories due to the grade of the lot. However, this building contained a below grade walkway that opened up to the rear of the commercial occupancies on the first floor. This wall was construction of masonry non-bearing hollow clay block with unreinforced masonry construction with full face brick veneer construction. The second floor and third floor incorporated an attached wood siding treatment for the entire rear facade. 2 large covered porches and access areas were present at the BC corner and the CD corner of the facade.
Yep.
So each end of the Bravo wall. No, each end of the Charlie wall.
Yeah, that's it.
The Delta side, this wall was constructed of masonry bearing wall with hollow clayed block wall, unreinforced masonry construction with full face brick veneer construction. There were no entrances to the building from this side of the structure. There were several apartment window openings and 3 openings to the unoccupied occupancy on the first floor. The facade had extensive window treatments and openings on the upper floor apartment. Okay, the virtual 360. The building took up a whole city block, as we mentioned. Some parking on the front side or the Alpha side. Some large trees on the Alpha Delta corner. The building had impressive visual from the Alpha side with a Bavarian appearance on the front, featuring a tall A-frame section on the Alpha side Bravo end, with a peaked roof front to back on the Bravo end, but only partially to the rear. The rest of the roof was crossways along the Alpha side, appearing like a peaked roof with false dormers on the roof facing the street. But it was in fact a flat roof with a facade. We will post pictures from the NIOSH report on our socials. The building had a complex footprint with a large recess area in the center rear where a large storage shed and a rear parking lot were. The main floor was divided into 4 retail spaces, plus there was a single-story financial loans business on the Bravo end of the building. The 4 retail spaces were, going from left to right, a tax preparation business, a small grocery store, a nail salon, and a vacant space on the Delta end. It may have been a pub before. The first floor was mostly retail window space except the Delta N, which was white stucco, only a couple of windows and a door. The second and third floors along the whole perimeter of the building, the third floor having some French balconies. The Charlie side had a slight grade separation, about 1/3 of a story. There were some porches in the apartments on the Charlie side. There were rear stairways from the parking lot to the second floor apartment porches. There were also numerous alterations to windows and doors on the first floor, covered over brickwork. The weather conditions at 1927 hours on October 12th, 2015. Temperature was 71 degrees Fahrenheit. Dew point was 30.9 degrees. The relative humidity was 23%. The winds were calm. The sky was clear. And there had been no precipitation for the past 24 hours.
Okay, so we have this rather unique big building, old building with commercial and mixed occupancy. On October 12th at 1926 hours of 2015, the department's comm center received a 911 call reporting smoke in an apartment building. 1927, the Fire Communications Center dispatched a regular alarm for an apartment fire. Fire Communications dispatched Car 4, Pumper 10, Pumper 25, Rescue 1, Truck 3, Truck 10, Pumper 23, Medic 5 on the tactical channel. The captain, who's a district safety officer assigned to Battalion 104, was working out of class that day as Battalion 104. Another captain was assigned to Battalion 104 district safety officer, so we had people doing trades and stuff. Car 104, Pumper 10, and Pumper 23 all arrived on scene at 1929, so nice quick response, only a couple of minutes. Car 104 parked on the Alpha side on the avenue across from the alley. Pumper 23 laid a 4-inch supply line to Pumper 10 from the east. The acting battalion chief left the vehicle and walked to Side Charlie. On Side Charlie, he met several occupants from the apartments above. The acting battalion chief assumed command of the incident and made the following assignments. Pumper 10 was assigned to be first floor of the apartment building. So that's the one above the commercial. Pumper 23 was assigned to the second floor of the apartment building, dealing with the life safety risk, right? Truck 3 was assigned to work with Pumper 10. Pumper 25 was assigned to take hose line into the first floor. So the actual first floor, there was confusion between first floor of the apartments, which at the back it appeared like that was the first floor, whereas at the front the first floor was commercial. Truck 10 split crew was assigned to search the second floor and roof operations. Pumper 10 en route, Officer Pumper 10 advised smoke showing on the from approximately 3 blocks away. As soon as they arrived, they stopped on the Alpha Delta corner of the fire building. Female victim told the officer of Pumper 10 that the fire was in the back of the building, the Charlie side. The officer Pumper 10 advised communications that Pumper 10 was on scene, smoke showing from a 3-story complex. Pumper 10A, so that's one of the members of Pumper 10, advised the Fire Communications Center that a working fire. The officer of Pump 10 assumed command, I guess before the chief got there, 1931. Pump 10 turned into the alley and parked on the Delta Charlie corner of the building in the alley. Pump 10 stretched a 1 3/4 hose line approximately 10 feet into the first floor of the vacant occupancy. So that was the former bar. Pumper 23 approached the fire building from the east. Pumper 23 arrived on scene at 1930. They laid a 4-inch supply line to Pumper 10 in the alley and parked behind Pumper 10. Black smoke was coming out of the vacant bar on the Alpha side, so the front. It was a bar. Pumper 23 went to the second floor of the apartment building, which at 1934 hours, Pumper 23 encountered heavy smoke on the second floor. They went across the hallway above the nail salon. Due to the increase in heat and smoke, they opened up the walls. Pumper 23 operated an 1 3/4 hose line from Pumper 10 to cool the room down. Pumper 10 was par 2, the officer of Pumper 10, and 1 firefighter. The other firefighter from Pumper 23 had met with the crew from Pumper 23. The firefighter got the officer and firefighter from Pumper 23 out of the apartment approximately 1947 hours. The officer of Pump 23 advised command the building needed to be evacuated less than 2 minutes later. Command requested the evacuation tones be sounded. The crew of Pump 23 left the building. The officer of Pump 23 met with command. The two firefighters went back to Pump 23 to change their cylinders. The officer of Pump 23 said the second floor was completely involved in fire about 4 or 5 minutes later. So this thing's rocking by the time they got there.
Keep in mind, these ordinary constructed buildings are actually all timber inside.
Yeah. So a lot of fuel,
Timber
probably
floors, timber
a lot
joists.
of cutouts and void spaces that are connected and stuff in an old
Yeah.
building that was built in
Yeah.
the 20s.
Yeah, the floors, of course, would be all, tongue and groove, large boards, right?
Yep.
Laid across wooden joists.
Yeah, with the common plumbing chases and stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Might have been a tin ceiling downstairs, which might have been ripped out at one point. Suspended ceilings, hidden spaces. There might have been all these things.
Yep. Truck 3 arrived on scene at approximately 1930 and parked at the Alpha side west of the nail salon of the fire building. The officer of Truck 3 and a firefighter went into the alley and then to side Charlie. Truck 3 forced the front doors of the vacant occupancy of the first floor. Then Truck 3 met Pumper 10 inside the vacant occupancy. A firefighter from Truck 3 had a thermal imager. The thermal imager indicated that the fire was next to them in the nail salon. Note, the rear entrance, Charlie, to the nail salon was bricked over. Companies had no access to the rear of the nail salon, which required them to go around to use the Alpha side to get in there. Truck 3 and Pumper 10 continued trying to locate the fire, but kept being stopped by walls. Pumper 10 went outside, but could not see any indication of the fire. Pump 10 went back to the building and went to the second floor. They found a gap in the wall and they could see fire. Firefighters were operating above the nail salon. A firefighter from Pump 10 had an 1 3/4 hose line and was hitting the fire. Pump 10 and Truck 3 tried to make the opening bigger to get to the fire, but were unsuccessful. The heat continued to increase, and crews realized the fire was now below them. The room had gotten very hot. Pump 10 and Truck 3 left the building. Truck 10 was dispatched to the apartment fire and arrived on scene about 1930. The apparatus operator parked Truck 10 on the Alpha side at the Delta corner of the building in the middle of the street. Fire apparatus operator then put the aerial up to the roof. An officer and a firefighter from Truck 10 went to Charlie's side. They entered the apartment building on the second floor and started to search for occupants. So there was these direct access stairs from the Charlie side to the second floor, so you could just go up from the parking lot to get to those apartments.
Yeah, kind of like a walk-up apartment almost.
Kind of like a walk-up apartment at the rear. Absolutely. I missed that at first until I really got reading it. It's like, how did they get up there? They met occupants from the building exiting the structure. The firefighter and the officer from Truck 10 continued to search the second floor and third floor of the apartment building until the evacuation was ordered at 1949. Fire apparatus operator from Truck 10 climbed the aerial ladder, went to the tip. He took out the second floor windows on the Delta side. He said that he could see into the apartments. He took out 4 rows of windows, which is as far as he could get before the evacuation order was sounded. The other firefighter from Truck 10 climbed the aerial and met the apparatus operator at the tip. Pump 25 was dispatched on a regular alarm for the apartment fire. They arrived on scene at 1930. The officer said they could see smoke showing from the east. Pump 25 laid in and parked on side Charlie in the rear parking lot. Pump 25 had laid a supply line for Pump 10, but Pump 23 had already laid into Pump 10 supply line. So Pump 25 connected the supply line to Pump 25 to their own truck. They pulled 300 feet of 1 3/4 hose line off Pumper 25. They went into the bar, which was the vacant structure, but they couldn't find the fire. They moved outside and went down the west side Alpha, which was very smoky. Pump 25 made entry into another business, which was the grocery store. They went inside and started tripping over merchandise in the store. Pump 25 was unable to determine how long they operated in the grocery store. The officer of Pump 25 asked for a thermal imager, which came from Truck 6. Pump 25 could see the fire and knocked it down. The officer of Pump 25 heard on the radio the fire was blowing out of the windows on the second floor. The evac tones were sounded at 1949. The crew from Pump 25 went back to Pump 25 and started hitting the fire with a deck gun. Car 104 arrived on scene at about 1929 hours. The captain, who was a district safety officer assigned to Battalion 104, was working out of his normal class as battalion chief. So he was acting up. Another captain was assigned as Battalion 104 safety officer. Car 104, the district safety officer left the vehicle on the Alpha side, proceeded to Charlie. They assumed command, and the district safety officer went interior with pump 10. The safety officer was carrying a Halligan and a thermal imager. The officer of pump 10 advised the fire was in the basement, was actually the ground floor. Note, the building did not have a basement. Command advised communications to prepare a second alarm. Actually, it was a first alarm for this incident because it didn't come in as a first alarm. The incident at 1931 hours due to the size of the building. Pump 24 was currently on Alpha side. Command ordered Truck 5 and Pump 24 to side Charlie for rescue of occupants from the building. Truck 5, Pump 24 rescued one female and one male from the third floor of the apartment building. Command was still operating on Charlie side. Car 105 advised companies to make entry to the building on side Alpha. At this time, there was no fire showing on Alpha side. Pump 23 came out of the building and was advised it was too hot to stay inside. Command called Pump 10 about their position and conditions. Pump 10 wanted to go through a wall to get to the fire. Suddenly, conditions worsened on the third floor. Command then requested that all the communications sound evac tones, get everybody out of the building. All companies were ordered to move back from the building and create a collapse zone. Note, the evacuation tones were a variable wobble sound transmitted on the tactical channel by comms communications center. Also, fire apparatus are to activate their air horns. During the department's review of the incident, there were firefighters on scene that stated they did not hear the evacuation tones or the radio communication to evacuate the building. Rescue 1 responded to the fire, arrived on scene at 1932 with heavy smoke showing on the Alpha side. Rescue 1 parked on the Alpha Bravo corner of the structure. Rescue 1 was divided into 3 teams, 2 with the primary function of being search and rescue. Rescue 1 proceeded to the grocery store next to the nail salon, which was very difficult to search due to the clutter. Ceilings were 8 feet with a drop ceiling. Rescue 1 pulled the ceilings and found nothing. Rescue 1 went in about 30 feet. Visibility was good. Rescue 1 checked the ceiling tiles in the grocery store. They operated in the grocery store for about 10 to 15 minutes. They then moved to side Charlie of the building and saw a panel of electrical meters on the building, exposure Bravo 2. Rescue 1 went into the next building with red double doors, which took them to a second floor of the apartment building. While on the second floor, they met Pump 24, who had a hose line. It was very hot on the second floor, and Rescue 1 stayed on the second floor for about 5 to 10 minutes. Rescue 1 backed out, went down the stairs to side Alpha, went outside to Car 105. The officer of rescue told 105 that the conditions were deteriorating quickly. Car 105 went to command to get everybody out of the building. Heavy black smoke was pouring out of the building on the Charlie side. Rescue 1 conducted a 360-degree search of the building. Rescue 1 staged at Truck 10, where the evacuation order was sounded. Car 101C arrived at scene at 1951. Command was preparing to change strategies to defensive and start ladder pipe operations. A personnel accountability report was conducted and completed. Car 101C ordered command, Car 104, to side Alpha, and Car 101C assumed command and assigned Car 104 as Ops Section Chief. So they upgraded to Incident Commander in 101, and then they gave Ops Section to 104, who was the initial IC. Structural collapse. As Car 101C assumed command at 1958, a collapse zone had been established on all sides of the structure by command at 2000 hours. Companies on Charlie started bringing hose lines out of the building. Crews from Pumper 10 and Pumper 23 moved the 2 inch and 3/4 hose lines that were being used back to Pumper 10. Ladder pipe operations for Truck 5, Truck 12, Truck 6, and Truck 3 and Truck 10 were initiated. A water supply issue caused the master stream operations to be delayed until adequate water supply sources could be established. At about 20:05, the crews operating on the Alpha side witnessed an interior collapse. The district safety officer from Car 104 witnessed the collapse on the Charlie side when a balcony and walls of the second floor apartment collapsed. Then the wall on side Delta collapsed into the alley, trapping 4 firefighters. The trapped firefighters were from Pump 10 and Truck 2. And
So this
Pump
is 40
23.
minutes into the incident, give or take,
Yeah,
since the alarm.
since the initial alarm with a really rapidly escalating fire. At the time of the collapse, which was approximately 20:06 hours, 2 firefighters from Pump 23, 2 firefighters from Pump 10, and 1 firefighter from Truck 2 were operating in the alley on the Delta side. That was a side where there was a grocery store across the alley. The tactical decision to place resources within the collapse zone was communicated over the radio by the Side Delta Division supervisor. This message was not confirmed by Incident Command. The task consisted of stretching and directing the hose line from the corner of the side delta of the structure and to place hose streams into openings that were showing aggressive fire. The crews on Delta side reported that the fire was impinging on a pumper that was spotted in the alley. Like that was like pump 23 or something that came in
Yep.
second due.
Pump 23, yeah.
When the collapse occurred, 1 firefighter from pump 23 was pushed to his knees near the driver's side tailboard of pump 23. The other firefighter from pump 23 was covered to his waist with debris. The firefighters from pump 10 and truck 2 were completely covered with debris. The firefighters from pump 10 and truck 2 were removed and pronounced dead at the hospital. 2 firefighters from pump 23 were removed and admitted to hospital for treatment.
So this wall that collapsed was actually one of the structural support walls.
Yeah, the weight was all on it, right?
Yeah. Well, if the floors started collapsing inside, which was noted first, right? So then your joists and everything are going to start to fall in a V pattern and push even more outwards on the walls as opposed to just downwards, which the walls are designed for. And so it's
Which
quite likely.
in the NIOSH report they talk quite a bit about that. I didn't go into too much detail with that here because it might be confusing, but that's absolutely correct.
Yeah, that's what you would expect to have happen. So I'm wondering how much forewarning they would have had with gaps in the brick and smoke coming out and so forth, right? So,
Yeah.
but if they're in this tight alley, which is barely twice the width of the fire truck, right? So your ability to stand there and look up 3 stories and it was night and be able to see what was going on with that wall would have been compromised. It would have been difficult.
Yep, very difficult.
So we're going to talk a little bit about some contributing factors that led to this fatality, double fatality, actually. And these 2 guys that died and the other 2 that were seriously injured, they would have had virtually no warning. I've had walls come down at fires, and they're standing 1 minute, and they fall so rapidly you can't even take pictures of them coming down. They come down so fast. Anyway, some contributing factors. Occupational injuries and fatalities are often the result of one or more contributing factors or key events in a larger sequence of events that ultimately result in the injury or the fatality. So NIOSH, which is the National Institute of Occupational Safety and Health, U.S. organization, their investigators identified the following items as key contributing factors in this incident that ultimately led to the fatalities. So read key, not necessarily every factor, but certainly the key ones. So starting off, it was an arson fire. So why is that key? It's key because probably the fire was accelerated, had an accelerant involved. So it would grow faster than you would normally expect a fire. And also it would be unwitnessed. It would happen at a time when the arsonist knew there was nobody there. So, well, usually, not always, but so that's possible reasons why that was a key factor. There was a failure to maintain an established exclusion and collapse zone on the Delta side. They had basically one apparatus in the alley, which was P23, and pump 10 was at the Charlie Delta corner, so presumably in a safe location, and truck 10 was on the Alpha Delta corner and kind of like that safe position, right on the corner where walls will fall either way. But pump 23 was definitely in the alley. Tactical level management, as in deficiencies there. The construction of the building, ordinary construction, which means masonry walls with timber interior, part of the reason it collapsed. Personal accountability, there were some issues with that, I guess. We'll talk about that. Unclear functions of the district safety officer. We never really talked about that earlier, Paul, but there was the initial incident commander was normally the district safety officer, and then somebody else was assigned.
Yeah, he kind of got directly involved. Like he went up to the second floor and
Yeah.
he was in with the crew,
Yeah.
possibly because he was acting up as a captain. And that transition from
Yeah.
tactical to strategic is often very hard. We talk about that when I teach ICS, and I did that when I went to Doug. We went to the fire chief's house fire. Des Cooper has chimney fire, and we just got the Bronto, and I was newly acting as a captain, and someone couldn't start the chainsaw, so I quickly walked up and, because I'm obviously the world's best chainsaw starter, and so I went and started the chainsaw for him, and I can't remember. I think it was Chief Cooper. He wasn't chief anymore; he'd retired, but he came up to me and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Paul," he says, "You're IC. You shouldn't be starting any chainsaws." And it's like, oh yeah, okay, lesson learned. You're right, because I totally lost everything else in the call at that time.
Yeah. Well, the job you're comfortable with is a job you do every day. So,
Yep.
in a serious fire, you're going to tend to go back to that.
Yeah.
I don't know if like the safety officer, maybe they usually go in and they're the inside safety officer. I don't know.
Maybe.
Right.
Yeah, we don't know that.
Because it
It's a good
sounds to
question.
me like there's two guys in the chief's car, and that one is the safety officer and the
Yeah.
other one's the chief, right?
Yeah.
So, which would
And they
mean
were
that
both
like,
acting.
which would mean that every chief there has got a safety officer with them. So
Yeah.
maybe they have one goes in and one stays out. I don't know. It's
Yeah. Or
speculation, I guess.
sometimes, Doug, the second set of eyes goes around where the IC can't see,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
is the eyes and ears on that side, right?
Yeah.
But really, sectoring is the better way to do that. But anyway, pre-incident planning, as in not adequate, and the building was non-sprinklered. A three-story building, a lot of those are not. Particularly one built in 25 would be predate any building codes, national codes, anyways. I don't know about city codes. So, recommendation number one coming out of this investigation was fire departments should ensure that when a collapse zone is established, that the collapse zone is properly managed and is enforced by the division supervisor, in other words, the sector commander, and or assistant safety officer. Command should also consider designating exclusion zones, like no entry zones, as needed due to dangerous or hazardous conditions. I know we used to carry red tape on our fire trucks, and the red tape was for the firefighters. The yellow tape was
Yeah,
for the public.
that's right.
Was for the public. So if you
Yeah.
were a firefighter and you saw red tape, you didn't pretend you didn't see it. You
Yeah,
paid
exactly.
you paid attention because it was there for you.
Yeah,
So
no, and I remember Phoenix. I don't know when it was during blue card training or some other time. They had videoed a couple of incidents where they had big warehouses on fire, and I don't know. I just call it like mission creep, right? You're all sitting there, you're doing surround and drown for 4 hours, and you guys just gotta reach in there a little bit closer, and then the garage door comes down on your head.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's all been good up till then.
yeah.
So anyway, part of the discussion on this out of the report is that in most fireground situations involving a structure fire, the probability of and an anticipation for a structural collapse or some compromise of the structure are minimized by the firefighters. They minimize that because it's, well, the building's standing, it must be okay. Or they overlook some obvious signs like cracks, smoke coming out of the bricks, whatever the case may be, or partial collapse, or at times disregard these risks until the catastrophic conditions present themselves with little or no time to react accordingly, right? So you don't get time to duck under the truck and shelter. You just don't have that time. So that's really arises out of a loss of situational awareness, coupled with a distracted attention to those subtle or even sometimes obvious pre-collapse building indicators, and the knowledge gaps in building and construction systems that combine to elevate the operational risks to the firefighters. They're just not recognized. So in some cases, this is a lack of training, a lack of pre-planning, and or a lack of awareness that they're in a danger zone. So at this particular incident, the evacuation tones were sounded at 1949 hours. So that's 15 minutes before the collapse, and per command of Car 104. These were then followed by orders for everyone to evacuate the structure. At 1949 hours, command ordered operations changed from offensive to defensive. So just less than a minute after the evac tones. So at 2000 hours, command, now Car 101C, ordered the Firecom Center to sound the emergency tones. So that would be the tones across the radios, right? And all companies were ordered to move back from the building and create a collapse zone. Crews operating in the alley side, which was on the Delta side, so between two buildings, a building involved in fire and a building not involved in fire, and were there when the collapse occurred at 2006 hours. So this is 40 minutes after the call came in initially.
Command was on top of it. I mean,
Yeah,
they had done the right stuff, right? It's just that somehow, it wasn't defined well enough, or the message didn't get out well enough. Like I said, some people didn't hear the tones, etc. But they were on top of it, and the
Yeah,
building gave them lots of time. And I mean, part of it too is that there's less and less 100-year-old buildings catch fire that we
yeah,
see. We're,
yeah,
we're we're in the more modern stuff all the time, and you
yeah,
get these old ones, and it can surprise some people that maybe
yeah.
haven't seen it before.
It would have been a noisy scene too. I mean, where the truck was with the firefighters standing near it, there were half a dozen other diesel trucks in the
Yeah,
immediate
yeah,
vicinity thereof, and the firefighting operations going on. So it would have been loud.
yeah,
And
for sure.
if you're not plugged
Recommendation
in,
number
yeah,
Recommendation number 2, fire departments should ensure that once command is established at an incident, the incident commander maintains control of situation status, resource status, and communications. Plus, he ensures the completion of the tactical objectives. The discussion here is that based on the design of the incident command system, the standard assumption of command establishes the organizational authority to perform command functions starting at the beginning of the incident. When the first officer arrives on scene, this officer has a responsibility to evaluate the incident conditions, identify a strategy, develop an incident action plan, determine how to progress towards completion of the tactical objectives, which would be rescuing the people and putting the fire out if they could. Address any safety considerations, deploy and assign operating companies, determine if there's a need for additional resources by Brunacinian way back in 2002. If the arrival, and that's the basis of the whole fire ground command and blue card system, the arrival of the battalion chief or district chief is more than a few minutes. The secondary resource may need to assume command. This officer operates in a standard position outside the hazard zone, monitoring comms, updating, reviewing, and reinforcing the initial size up, backing up the initial attack, verifying the safety, welfare, and accountability of the crews. At this incident, Car 104 arrived on scene and assumed command, walked to Side Charlie, and operated at this location until Car 101 arrived on scene. The driver of Car 104, which was the safety officer, separated from command and worked with companies conducting firefighter operations on Side Charlie. In order to provide effective command and control of an incident, the incident commander must use a tactical worksheet or an accountability board and ensures that the incident action plan is followed and benchmarks are met and that are documented. So if he's standing outside in the alley watching stuff going on his own, he has put himself as a deficit right there. It's noisy. The radio transmissions might not get through. It's hard to take notes and write on stuff when you're standing outside in the dark. He would have been better off to be either in a vehicle or at a command board right behind a vehicle or something like that where he's got some resources. And his driver left him. He was safety officer, so he didn't have an assistant. So
yeah,
these are all things that I don't know. We've done 58, 59 of these episodes, and every time incident command is alone, these problems come up. They can't
yeah,
be left alone. They need a helper.
yeah. And also the alpha side where he was extraordinarily smoky. The wind was clearly pushing that way, so visibility and other conditions would have been poor.
Yep.
I
So
think
that
it's
might,
great. I think it's great that they give their chiefs drivers and have two people in the chief's car. But the problem is that they gave the driver another job to do,
yep,
when the
Exactly.
driver should be
eyes
aiding
and
the
ears.
chief, right?
He's the aide. Yep.
Yeah. And then the way you do that is the next in chief is the safety officer, and his aide can help him
Exactly.
do that job, right?
Yep.
You don't, yeah. Recommendation number 3: fire departments need to consider the impact of a structural fire on a building construction and the potential for structural collapse. This process must be incorporated into the strategic, tactical, and task level operations at an incident. Firefighters are at a significant risk for injury or death due to structural collapse during firefighting operations. United States Fire Administration and the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, report that 984 firefighters died between 2000 and 2010. Structural collapse caused 134, which was 13.7% of these firefighter line of duty deaths. Structural collapse often results in multiple firefighter injuries and fatalities. While structural collapse is a significant cause of injury and death to firefighters, the potential for structural collapse is one of the most difficult circumstances to predict. At this incident, the incident commander requested the evacuation tones at 14:49 hours, which was 20 minutes into the incident. The strategy was to get all firefighters out of the building. and initiate defensive firefighting operations. At 2000 hours, the Fire Communications Center announced for all crews to move away from the structure and establish a collapse zone. During the interviews, some firefighters stated that they never heard this communication. On the Delta side, companies continued to operate in the collapse zone until the structural collapse occurred at 20:06 hours. The incident commander must initiate a personnel accountability report to ensure that all companies are operating outside of the collapse zone. And that's something I was thinking. Oh, Paul walked away. I just noticed when we were reading earlier, and they said that some people didn't hear the tone of the evacuation orders. I was thinking, well, why didn't command do a PAR and confirm that everybody heard it and was out? Like that,
Yeah.
if you're going to evacuate the building, the next thing you should be doing is checking that everybody heard it and is evacuated.
Well,
and
yeah,
accounted
that's
for.
one of the recommendations on PARs in particular, right? When there's a change in strategy, which there was, remember, at 1949 or whatever, change in strategy from offensive to defensive. So PAR would have been appropriate at that time, and that then would have probably picked up on the fact that Engine 23 was in the alley was still operating there. But there was no comment that was done, eh? We did not see that.
Yeah,
in the
exactly.
narrative.
Well, they did their job. They got the residents out, which was great. And then it was just, and the firefighters were all outside, but for some reason they weren't. They were in that collapse zone.
It's tough to not operate in a collapse zone, though.
It is. It is.
It's
hard.
a little easier at a 2-story or 1-story building because it's not. But like a 3-4 story building, the collapse zone's 2 blocks away because you're supposed to be 1.5 times the. But it's like the fire's right there. I need to stand here to put the fire out. That's right there. Like,
Yeah.
it's
There are areas that are more dangerous than other areas,
for sure. Yeah.
and being in the middle of a 3-story load-bearing wall with no place to run because it's an alley
I was
is
just
possibly the worst choice.
I've heard Chief Lasky talk about in a lot of collapses, the guys that get affected are the ones in the alley. Because when you're on a street or the front yard, you have room to run away. Where in the alley, you have room to run side to side, but that part of the wall is collapsing too. So you have nowhere to go.
Also, I think you've got a better perspective if you're on the street. You can be a few feet further back and get a better view of what's happening.
Yeah, at
When you're
least
in the
somebody
alley,
can, right?
you got your nose up against the wall virtually, and everything's over your head. So, when it goes wrong, it's going to go wrong really badly for you.
But it's tough because this is where the fire is. So where am I supposed to go?
Yeah. The only refuge they had was beside the truck, right? And hopefully it might protect them from the bricks falling down.
Yeah.
But
I'm not entirely certain what they were doing in the alley because there were no windows or openings on the main floor. There were two floors above residential with window openings, which the ladder operator of the I forget the name of the area, was a truck 10 out front, had stretched the ladder down the alley and taken out some second and third floor windows. So I'm not sure what they were doing from the alley, just penciling streams up and into those windows over your head.
From the pictures, the alley looked almost like a street though, because there's a grocery store facing it. So it looks like a street, even though it was a dead end, if you will.
Yeah, narrow though.
Well, that was also the access to the second floor, right? The stairs.
No, not on the Delta side. Not.
No, you couldn't get. You had to get it from the Charlie or the Bravo.
Charlie side.
Bravo.
Yeah. Okay. So this whole building structure was almost like, from the Charlie side, it was a 2-story apartment building.
Yeah.
With very little, if any, access. I think they could only get into the vacant bar from the Charlie side, and then you came around to the Alpha side, and you got access to the 1, 2, 3, 4 up to 5 ground floor commercials, right? But very limited access to the upper floors. I think there was 1 stairway in the B1. Yeah. So really, it was almost like 2 buildings on fire in the place of 1. Really, one over the other.
I'll throw the pictures and floor layouts and stuff on the social.
It's a tiny bit confusing, but when you see the pictures, it all makes sense.
Yeah. Recommendation number 4, which, pretty predictable here. Code setting organizations and municipalities should consider requiring the use of sprinklers in multi-occupancy structures, especially when you have different types of uses, right? So not much discussion on that one. Recommendation 5, fire department should consider implementing pre-incident planning program that complies with NFPA 1620, the standard for pre-incident planning. Pre-incident planning, of course, the process of gathering and documenting information that could be critical for making life-saving decisions at an incident such as a structure fire. It's an essential, no matter the size of a fire department. Even the smaller towns contain buildings or sites that require pre-incident plans based on a community risk assessments. These occupancies can include, but are not limited to, especially schools, high rise occupancies, hospitals, nursing homes, medical clinics, hazardous material manufacturers or shippers, transportation agencies, or any business that's deemed to be by the fire department to be a high risk occupancy or a target hazard. At the time of the incident, the department did not have a program in place to provide pre-incident plan for identified hazards throughout the city. So even though a big city, 500,000 people almost in 2015, they didn't have a program. I know the one program we were playing with in Fort Saskatchewan was this Ottawa, the one made by the Ottawa Fire Department called APX Data. And it's a really easy for firefighters to use. It's iPad based, basically walk around and pick the little icons, and kind of like Facebook, you just throw the higher fire hydrant or the propane tank or the whatever risk thing onto it, and it works together with Google Maps. And as soon as you pull that address up, it automatically shows you the stuff. That's something that, it's an easy pre-incident planning program, because it is a task that isn't getting done in every fire department I've been on. Of the 4 or 5 I've been on in my career, none of them had effective pre-incident planning.
Yeah. So, one of the things is life risk, right? Risk to lives. And I think the firefighters, sometimes are not thinking that life risk is themselves also. It's not just the occupants of that building. And I know in my last department, we had targeted all of these buildings that we thought were actual firefighter risk as well as an occupant risk. I remember one in particular was being used as a rooming house, and the hallways in this place were so small that two packed up firefighters couldn't pass each other. Like
Wow.
the alley, like the hallways were that small, and that was a very high risk building. And guess what? It caught fire.
Yeah, there you
And
go.
burned and collapsed in the middle of the fire. And
Yeah,
it was a 3-story brick facade, heavy timber interior, been built in 1890 or something like that.
yeah.
But it was on our radar as a dangerous building for many reasons. And so we did a lot of code enforcement on it, of course. But I really think the fire departments need to be thinking along the lines of, if I had a fire there, could I evacuate? Could I get in and do rescues? Could I do firefighting safely for myself, let alone the people that are in there? And be thinking along those lines, as well as thinking about, are the smoke alarms working? Are the door closers working? Think also about its impact of the building on you as a firefighter if you were there some dark and stormy night.
Well, and it doesn't need to be an official department pre-plan, right?
That's right.
Like yes, that's great, but when you're driving around, when you're on your medical call, when you're going to get groceries, whatever, think about the buildings that you're seeing in front of you, and
Yeah.
think about, like, what if this building was on fire? What
Yeah.
if whatever, right?
Yeah. The light bulb should go on.
For
So,
sure.
recommendation number 6, fire departments should consider implementing a critical building information system that is available to responding units to enhance situational awareness. That's kind of what we're talking about, Doug,
Mm-hmm.
but somewhat formally. So, coupled with a pre incident planning program, a critical incident dispatch system program, they've given it a name, CIDS, provides critical building information that may not be readily apparent to the to the responding companies when they arrive at the building. This program can also provide accurate and consistent information for required radio progress reports. In other words, you should do PARs more frequently, something like that, and indicates where variations in standard operating procedures would be necessary due to previously known features found at this location. And this, Paul, you talked earlier about the structure of the building. No, I'm sorry, I think it was you, Doug, and was talking about the limited access to the building, and how one part of the building did not connect with another part of the building, and where that was actually a serious problem. So the fire department in this incident had responded to this location for numerous emergency medical service incidents, at least 3 prior working fires. Hello. Individual companies had developed informal procedures for responding to the structure in the event of a structure fire. These procedures were never put into a formal format to be used by initial responding companies. So, what's the risk of not writing it down? The risk is that only the company that was there and saw these hazards knows about it. The other two or three don't. And in this case, it was a 3-shift rotation. So one might know about it and the other two not, or two might know about it because they were there individually, saw different things maybe, and the third shift might not know.
Exactly. How do we share that info? And that's why I like that app there that I was talking about, because it's really easy to use, and it's kind of like using an iPad in your phone, which all the firefighters today are using. So anyway, recommendation number 7: fire departments should ensure incident commanders incorporate the principles of command safety into the incident management system. The purpose of command safety is to provide the incident commander with the necessary resources on how to use, follow, incorporate safety into the incident management system at all incidents. Command is used as part of the 8 functions of command, and it's developed by Alan Brunacini. Following this incident, several command safety issues were addressed by the fire department as part of the recovery process, which we cover a little bit later. These issues were included in the fireground communications, personnel accountability, and the use of tactical worksheets, which complements that personal accountability and crew integrity, and is continuous scene size up and evaluation. This fire was changing. We've commented about how they didn't maybe notice the changes, although command did, but it just didn't get that message out to everybody that, hey, we're at risk here. So that's just something that they recommended.
Recommendation number 8 is fire departments should develop and consistently use a system to maintain accountability for all resources assigned to the incident. The personnel accountability or system is designed to track firefighters by location and function. An integral part of the accountability system is to make sure that firefighters who are assigned and operating in the hazard zone are accounted for, starting with the initial operations through the entire incident. Also, a process must be in place to periodically check and make sure that all members operating in the hazard zone are accounted for throughout the incident. At this incident, a formal personnel accountability process was not used, though numerous PARs were conducted. The accountability tags were not picked up from each apparatus and taken to the command post. This is a requirement of the department's General Operational Guidelines, 11-9, Department Accountability. Command must have a means to track all resources on scene, whether it be accountability board or a tactical worksheet. Also, when a PAR is conducted, the company officer or division group supervisor has to report a PAR with an actual number of members to be accounted for. This ensures that the number provided to command matches the number command has for each apparatus. At the time of the structural collapse, there were more than 110 firefighters, fire officers, and EMS personnel on scene. That's a lot.
That's a lot. They had a lot of people. Yep, for sure.
For only being like a second alarm or third, that's a lot of people.
And no formal accountability system.
Yeah, and like
implemented.
Like we said, the almost one of the earliest major points of failure in this was when they ordered an evacuation. It wasn't followed up by a PAR. That's like the first spot that. Not that it might not have made a difference, but you should have. Something that serious should be followed up upon to make sure everybody knows.
Recommendation number 9 was fire departments should ensure that incident commanders establish a stationary command post that's tied to a vehicle for effective incident management. The command post should be staffed with the incident commander and a staff assistant. The incident commander and the staff assistant should maintain the tactical worksheet, fireground communication, and resource status. The discussion around this is, in order to effectively command an incident, the incident commander needs to be in the most advantageous position possible. NFPA 1561, the Standard on Emergency Services Incident Management System and Command Safety, states the following on establishing a command post at the incident scene. The best position for a stationary command post is a fixed, visible, and accessible location. This can be accomplished by utilizing the incident commander's staff vehicle, or a designated command vehicle, or a fire apparatus. An acceptable alternative is using the rear of a sport utility vehicle or van-size vehicle. This method provides the incident commander with an area that is quiet and free of distractions to which command an incident. It's also vital for the incident commander to be able to hear all radio transmissions, especially from those operating on scene. The best way to accomplish this is with a radio communication headset. This will enable the incident commander to be in the best position possible to hear critical radio transmissions. At this incident, the incident commander operated on Side Charlie, the back, without benefit of a command vehicle. Without the benefit of his tactical worksheet, the incident commander was depending completely on memory of the location of all companies operating in or around the building. With at least 3 alarms operating on scene, crews operating interior on sides Alpha and Charlie, roof ops, several companies splitting crews up, it goes beyond the ability to effectively manage resources by memory. I was a deputy chief in Clearwater when I started out there. The fire apparatus were white. And I asked the chief, why are the vehicles white? And she said, so you can write on them. And we used to carry dry erase markers and write on the hood if we were stuck in an area where we had to be outside. Although once we did blue card training, that convinced us rapidly that the incident commander needed to be inside a vehicle with the ability to, shut windows and doors and make it quiet, to focus on the people that are in the hazard zone, that are in the, IDLH environment, and having a helper. And I'm a firm believer in that.
Yeah, and this idea of operating out of a vehicle is not new, and some people may feel that it is, perhaps because it's not their normal operating thing. But this goes back to Al Brunacini and the 80s, where I know they had, and I'm going to talk
I've got
about
the
Phoenix,
video. I can send it to you. I got the video, 1978 or 80.
Yeah, and where they used to take his incident commanders and basically chain him to the steering wheel of his car and say, "You're doing it from here, bud."
The video is called Fire Command in Action on YouTube. It's poor shape, but you can watch it. I mean, they did tests. Blue Card did tests. They put a guy on a treadmill, and they said, "Okay, stand here, walk around the scene, and you can be the commander, and then you guys go sit in a truck and try that out." And obviously, the truck works much better. I like Calgary uses a van, actually, a high top van. They used to use an old high top ambulance with a bit of command space in it. And there's a few places in Ontario that use a van, although the connotations of a van for battalion chief, everybody wants an SUV instead. But
yeah, I was in the process of setting one up in my last department, and I retired in the process of doing that. And I don't believe they ever implemented it. I think they use it for community events now. So I think it was an opportunity lost, but that's just my opinion on that.
Calgary's been doing it for years, and it works well for them.
But to take this even further, your accountability, I think, needs to be part of that command post, and you also need a scribe or somebody who's going to be sitting in there taking notes, because having been at many scenes over the years, particularly the longer ones, not only do you lose track of when things happened, you lose the order of when things happened. And I used to take my own notes, basically, and I was sometimes shocked when I would read back through as to when things happened, what time they happened, and what order they happened. I would go, gosh, that's not exactly the way I remember it. And I thought that happened a lot sooner than it did, and all that kind of stuff, right? So that just shows the value, and particularly when you're trying to figure out, well, how long has that sector been, operating inside, on the third floor? You wouldn't necessarily know that unless you had some form of accountability or note taking, or times were noted, or whatever the case may be. And you're not at the entry point, so your entry control person really should know how long people were in on air, and you can always communicate with them. But it's also not a bad idea to have a sense yourself as the incident commander and have that up close. Now, realizing, of course, that if command is mobile when you first arrive on the scene, and you're the officer on the truck, and you're still trying to get your 360 or picture what's going on, you're not sitting in the truck, you are moving around. But I've also seen people, sitting on the front bumper of a pumper that's pumping water, trying to do incident command, and that's crazy.
That's hard.
That's crazy on many levels.
Yeah, I know. There's actually a video series online on YouTube called "Inside the Command Post," and I think it's San Diego, a battalion chief with San Diego Fire, and they did a series of about 25 of these videos, and they're so well done. Inside his command post, inside his SUV. They're so well done. At first, I thought they were scripted, but they're not. This guy, he does such a good job. It's definitely worth the watch. And years ago, before a blue card, I was looking at these as a way to try to teach our people, like, follow these, because it's so well done inside the command post. But the same thing, you need an environment you can control, because you are the decision maker.
Yeah. I used to have multiple radios. I had my sat phone, I had my cell phone, I had all those things, and I could call all kinds of resources, do anything I needed, out of the rain, out of the wind. Of course, the advantage of sitting on the front bumper of a pumper is if you let go of your paperwork, you know where to find it, plastered against the radiator.
That's right. Yeah, it's sucking it in. Why is the truck overheating? Yeah, exactly.
Okay, moving on to the next one. Recommendation 10. Fire departments should ensure that a tactical worksheet is used by the incident commander during initial fireground operations and is maintained throughout the incident. So part of the discussion this would be the fact that the tactical worksheet is a vital piece of equipment because it helps the incident commander organize the incident from the initial onset of the incident. Now, let's keep in mind that the first few minutes, you don't have a tactical worksheet with you. You're one crew, one officer, maybe even two crews and one officer, but somewhere pretty soon in the incident, you got to start deciding whether you're a crew chief or an incident commander. If you're the incident commander, you got to move into that mode. So the benefit of using a tactical worksheet is that the critical information is documented, as well as providing reminders, prompts, benchmarks, basically, a convenient workspace for tracking of company and apparatus. So, we're starting to work in accountability here at the same time. For fire departments that provide a staff assistant or an incident command technician, which we highly recommend, even if your department doesn't have one assigned to you permanently, you might want to grab somebody, as soon as you've got the staff to do that. So for fire departments that provide a staff assistant or an incident command technician, the district chief or the battalion chief, whoever's in the IC, in the early going anyways, has the ability of starting the tactical worksheet even en route to the incident. He's in the passenger seat. So he can start filling in the information. In a lot of departments, there's pre-planned information that goes out with the dispatch. You get a printout and it gives you some basic stuff like where's the hydrant, where's the main door, what the immediate risks, like it's a 3-story, so many occupants, or there's so and so on the 3rd floor that, going to need assistance getting out, that kind of stuff. But although not everybody does that and not everybody's on CAD that way.
Big problem. Yep.
Yeah. And really, in this day and age, it's hard to imagine a reason why you're not going that way. I mean, if you're a small fire department in a rural area that doesn't really even have enough money to buy, the equipment that you need, we can understand that. But maybe regionally one can get together because you've probably got a regional dispatch and get together and start moving in that direction. It pays dividends. Anyway,
I got a grant in Fort Saskatchewan. I got a grant from Factory Mutual for $3,000 or $4,000 to buy APX Data, which is an Ottawa company that builds pre-planning software that uses iPads. And the grant bought us like 2 or 3 iPads, which we already needed iPads to do the command training with. And then and the firefighters could do pre-plans with. I don't know if they're still using it, but so even if you don't have a lot of money, there is ways to get some pre-planning horsepower behind your agency.
And I know a lot of volunteer departments use I Am Responding, and I believe I Am Responding even has that capability now. Although I could be wrong on that, but I know they were working in that direction, and I believe it's working.
You're right.
And there's another company in Eastern Canada that's built their own system that they claim is better, and that's available also. So there's a number of solutions out there. Anyway, at this incident, the incident commander was Car 104. Remember, he was acting in that position. He was operating from the Charlie side, so that's the back of the building, right? So that they were behind the building where the access to the 2nd floor residentials were, 2nd and 3rds. Anyway, during the initial stages of this incident, he was operating without the benefit of a vehicle or tactical worksheet. I'm not sure what happened to his vehicle. It was there.
It was parked out front.
Right. So he walked around the back.
Yep.
Yeah. So he got separated from his tools is what happened.
Mm-hmm.
And we talked about this, I think, earlier in the podcast, is that he was acting in that position as a battalion chief. So maybe at this serious incident, his mind slipped back to his normal position, which was more of an active role than perhaps being an incident commander with his vehicle. Anyway, fire departments should ensure that a stationary command post is established at working incidents or any time that command is established. This process includes initiating strategy and incident action plan, tactics, in other words, initiating the tactical worksheet and starting personal accountability system process. If you don't have a stationary IC that's visible, people coming into the scene, other companies, other resources, police, power companies, all these other people, they can't find you. They might find you, but if you're just standing on the back, with a radio in your hand, you're not necessarily well distinguished, unless you got one of those, green flashers on your helmet, but you probably don't.
Yeah, but we used to have a magnetic green flasher in all our Chiefs trucks, and whoever was command would put that on the top of the Chiefs trucks. And I've done it before where the Chief truck, I couldn't get into the scene for whatever reason. It was a narrow street or whatever. There was hose in the way. I've done it where I've walked up, and the one fire, I remember doing it. We had a basement fire, almost lost a victim in that one. But anyway, I remember the brush truck was the first in just because it was practice night, and it was the one that was out and about, and it was first in, and it was facing the house, and so I went and sat in the passenger seat of the brush truck, which wasn't pumping because it was a structure fire, and that was my new command post, and that worked great. So you had and all our trucks had tactical worksheets in them just in
Right.
case that person ended up being command.
Right.
Just the
Right.
way to do it.
And if you are a more senior officer and command is, part of the thing you almost always do or often do, it doesn't hurt to have a satchel with you, a briefcase where you have basic tools, and you carry those with you. And it's like Paul says, if you're not going to be in your vehicle with all your support, you can have your mini me vehicle in a satchel, and you walk down to your nearest, vehicle that isn't working too hard and is too noisy, and you get in that and go from there. So you need
Exactly.
to be
Yep.
flexible, but you need to follow certain rules, I
You
think, to
need to
make it
do this,
effective.
and
Yeah,
so many of these reports, like we've done 50, this is episode 59, so many of these, it is the command issue that they didn't have the appropriate tactical worksheet, they didn't have a place to work, they weren't aware of what was going on, they didn't have an assistant. We repeat these over and over, but
yeah,
anytime there's multiple line of duty deaths, this is a common factor that we
yeah.
see.
And part of it, I really think is a huge number of our calls, 50, 60, 70% are medical calls. Yeah, it's basically a two-person response. Sometimes you send the whole company and it's four people, but it's a single unit response. And most of the other stuff that's fires, which are only like 5% of the calls are fires. And most of those are things like 2, 3 unit garages or house fires are quickly knocked down. They don't develop into much. And so you're used to working with, at most 12 people on the scene, that kind of a stuff. So very easy to manage in your head. So you get into this, you lose the skills of managing bigger companies, and keeping span of control, right? So what's the rule of span of control? 5 to 7 when things are just happy, and when things are popping and there's a real incident, it's 3 to 5 tops, but normally 3. So that means 3 sectors or 3 operations going on at the same time, that type of a thing. So things will get away on you, and it gets away quickly, and there's no coming back from that once it
Yeah, years
happens.
ago when my department that I was a deputy chief with was evaluating a command training program, which happened to be Blue Card is what we chose. But anyway, and we asked the chief of Red Deer, the city of Red Deer, went out for lunch one day and said, "Why did you do this? A city of 100,000. Why did you choose Blue Card? What is it?" And he says, "It's exactly what." He says, "I know that the officer in charge of that call has fought this fire before." He says, "It's 2 a.m. He gets a high-rise apartment fire or Walmart on fire or whatever." He knows the officer's done it before because he's done it in simulations, and they
At
have to
least.
redo every 3 years. They have to redo all the simulations again because so that repetitive, hey, I've done this command, because you're right, we get that routine.
Slide
That
deck.
routine calls that we forget. And
Yeah.
so we build a slide deck, we build the skills. And he says, really, that's why we have a command training program, is because I don't have to wake up. This is the deputy chief. I don't have to wake up at 2 a.m. when I hear the guys getting paged out to something serious. I know they've done it before. They're going to take care of it. The rest of the stuff they know how to do, and now they know how to do command. And it's the same way that the military trains pilots and tank commanders and ship commanders and stuff. It's all simulations and
Yeah.
repetition.
Yeah, I know when I was a chief, I used to listen to the calls even at night, and mostly I would have no issues, but then you hear the unusual one that just your spidey senses told you it was going to become a major incident, and you started worrying because you realized, I don't know if we've done one of those before, or it's been a
Yeah,
while, or
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
buddy's going to
Okay.
need help.
Yeah, might want to send some more resources. Okay, so and that's what we're there for. Like, what does a deputy chief do? We're there for when there's a problem, right? If it's getting pizza, great. If it's something worse, then that's what we're there for as well. Recommendation number 11. Fire department should provide a checklist for the incident commander regarding procedures in the event of a mayday. We used to put these on the back of the tactical worksheet, actually. When a mayday is transmitted for whatever reason, the incident commander has a very narrow window of opportunity to locate the lost, trapped, or injured members. The incident commander must restructure the strategy and the incident action plan, the tactics, to include a priority rescue. At this incident, Car 101 arrived on scene at 1958 hours and had assumed command from Car 104. Car 104 was assigned as Operations Section Chief. 2 minutes later, at 2000 hours, command asked for emergency tones, emergency traffic, I like to call it because that's the name of the podcast, to create the collapse zone around the structure. At 2001 hours, command asked for operations to meet him on the Alpha side at the command post where he had parked. Command and operations were meeting. The collapse occurred on the Delta side in the alley at 2006 hours. Command immediately requested a Mayday response plus additional medic units. The Fire Communications Center also assigned TAC Channel A6 for fireground operations not involved in the Mayday, so everybody else could move to the tactical channel and Mayday would stay where they were. Also, command requested a hose line for the fire while RIC operations were being conducted in the alley, trying to get the bricks and the debris off of the trapped firefighters. The intent of a Mayday worksheet, like a tactical worksheet, is to assist the incident commander during the very difficult and stressful time on the fireground. The Mayday worksheet provides incident commander with a checklist to ensure no critical actions are missed. Also, the incident commander should ensure that firefighting operations continue. A big one that comes to mind as I'm reading this was the Deutsche Bank fire, which we did last month. The firefighters that ended up being injured and rescued, the ambulance was a significant distance away from the elevator they used to bring the firefighters down on. So that was something that was missed in the planning and the operations, in that if something goes wrong, what's going to happen, right? How are we going to deal with it? And as a chief officer showing up on scene, that's always what I asked myself as soon as I pulled up on scene was, what if something goes wrong? What if the fire truck quits? What if we have a medical emergency? What if the situation changes? Because I've been caught before.
Supply
And
line
it's,
breaks.
yeah, right, anything could happen, right? We were at one scene out in a rural property for just a big hay shed fire, big bales and stuff, but the wind changed. A thunder cell came through and the wind changed 180 degrees. And my guys had ended up following the hose line down between the buildings and the sewage lagoon to not fall in, because visibility went to nothing and they're trying to get out of there, right? And so you have to plan for those events. That's what our job
Yeah.
is.
Yeah. But Paul was reading this and yeah, look between the lines of what he said. He said, at this incident, Car 101C, who would be, I don't know, a deputy or an assistant chief, arrived on the scene and took command at 1958 hours. At 2000 hours, which is 2 minutes after he arrived on scene, excuse me, let me back up. At 1958 hours, he took over command from Car 104. So Car 104 was the guy who was standing alone on the Charlie side in command without his resources, trying to command from just basically standing there. And 101C arrived, and within 2 minutes of arriving, he recognized something in that scene and decided to have an emergency tones sounded and create a collapse zone around the structure. So he did that within 2 minutes of arriving. So he saw something right away from his resources. And at 01 hours, he asked for basically Car 104, which was now operations, to meet him on side Alpha, which is out front. And the collapse happened at 06. So you've got a guy that arrived, the deputy or whoever he was, arrived, took command, had a meeting, had called for emergency tones and an operations collapse zone, and then the collapse happened. It's not 6 minutes after that. So there was obviously some signs that were being missed, some information that was being missed and was then acted upon. And so there was a narrow window there for people to have gotten out of the way of this incident.
Yeah, and the command recognized it, but they just couldn't happen fast enough.
Right.
Yeah.
So recommendation number 12, fire departments need to ensure incident commanders assign a safety officer as early in the incident as possible. Clearly when you've got staffing to do that, right? And also just has to be the right people, right? People with training and so forth. So consideration should be given to the appointment of an assistant safety officers if the incident escalates or the situation dictates. In other words, the incident's too large to see it all from one spot. So you may need assistance. So with the advent of the incident command system, the goal is to ensure that the incident commander is responsible for the safety and welfare of all members and other first responders who are on scene at the incident. So you could have medics there, you could have Power Corporation people there, you could have, other police officers there. There's other people besides just firefighters. The fire department in this incident utilizes the concept of a district safety officers assigned to each battalion chief. There were 3 on scene here, Paul? I think there was
I
2 or
think
3.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
2 or 3.
At an incident, the district safety officer can function as a safety officer or as a chief's aide. We had some discussion on that idea.
Yeah, the
earlier.
safety officer went up on the second floor and he was in with the teams, which might have been
Yeah.
a little too deep.
Yeah, so I'm not sure he was a chief's aide or a safety officer at that time. It's hard to know. At this incident, the first arriving district safety officer entered the fire building with companies from the first alarm assignment. The safety officer function was not initiated until the arrival of Car 600, which is another battalion chief, at 2808 hours.
So they basically didn't have a safety officer. Yeah, very critical. So recommendation 13, of course, fire department should develop training program for staff assistants or incident command technicians. And this is a big one that many fire service leaders have been harping on. Many departments have pushed for these. I know Baltimore, after they lost the guys there a few years ago, Phoenix had them for years. They call them FITS, Field Incident Technician. Anyway,
it's also a position that tends to get cut when they're looking to do staff cuts.
First one. Why can't he drive himself, he or she?
Yeah. What job's that guy doing besides chauffeuring the chief around?
Exactly.
Which is wrong.
Yep, that's wrong. The function of a chief aide, incident command technician, emergency incident technician, field incident technician, or staff assistant, whatever you want to call it, is an essential component of the incident management system. Let's learn from these experts that have identified this before. This was written by Alan Brunacini in 2002. At this incident, due to the immediate issues of life safety, the staff aide, which was a district safety officer, assisted with the rescue of the building occupants. That's also important, but the problem is you may overlook safety. The staff aide separated from the incident commander and went interior with companies on the Charlie side to assist with firefighting operations. The incident commander operated him by himself on side Charlie until Car 101C arrived on scene. Car 104, which was an acting battalion chief, operated on the Charlie side without the benefit of a tactical worksheet or an accountability board, probably just his portable radio in a noisy scene.
So he didn't have the support he needed, and he was starting to get disconnected from the incident.
Same thing the chief in Baltimore said after that line of duty death. At one point, he had 26 direct reports, and he's like, "I was completely overwhelmed. I had no idea what was going on." Now, Baltimore since has instigated serious incident command training with their staff, and they've been responding much better to calls lately. If you listen to the radio traffic from the bridge, for example, the battalion chief in charge did classic ICS. I use these things as training tools in my incident command training classes, actually. Recommendation number 14, fire department should ensure all operating engine, truck, and rescue companies have a thermal imager. Another valuable tool that enhances situational awareness is a thermal imager. The thermal imager provides a technology with a potential to enhance firefighter safety and improve the ability to perform tasks such as size up, search and rescue, attack, and ventilation. Thermal imagers should be used in a timely manner. Firefighters should be properly trained in the use of a thermal imager. Most of all, be aware of their limitations. A good friend of mine, former coworker of mine, Manfred Keene, he works for Bullard. He goes all over the world training people on how to use thermal imagers. And he's a firefighter. He was a chief in Dryden or something. And he knows how to do it. But it's critical to have this, especially for size up. We ended up, when I left in 2020, we were giving all of our officers in the right-hand seat a small thermal imager and another thermal imager for the crew, so that they could use a thermal imager for size up. Look at that building. Can you see any cracks? Can you see heat coming out somewhere? What's the situation? They may have seen something on the Delta side where the collapse was going to go down. At this incident, members of Truck 3 and Truck 6 provided a thermal imager to use while operating in the grocery store and the vacant occupancy on Alpha side. The department equips all truck companies and rescue companies with thermal imagers. All engine companies should also be equipped with a thermal imager, in the opinion of this report.
Yeah, I would also add to this incident happened in 2015, so thermal imager technology by then was not the big clunky thing that took two
Right.
guys to carry. Well, I'm exaggerating, but they used to be quite large and occupied your entire hand and attention when you had one of them. Now they just hang around your neck like a personal camera.
Mm-hmm.
They can be quite small and quite handy. And yeah, every vehicle should have one. And I think that all your chief cars should have one also. And
Yep.
for two reasons. Not necessarily that your chief is going to use it, but so you've got a spare on scene specifically, and if you are splitting companies like rescue companies and you've only got the one unit, you've got a second one that can be
Yeah.
given to another crew. So
Keep them up and put the old one in the chief's car.
yeah, I think they're like radios, right? I mean, every crew should have one.
Yep, exactly. Absolutely. Recommendation. Oh, this is yours.
Yeah.
Whoops, sorry.
Recommendation 15. Fire departments should ensure that all members engage in emergency operations. I'm sorry, let me start that again. Recommendation 15. Fire departments should ensure that all members who are engaged in emergency operations receive annual proficiency training and evaluation on fireground operations. Discussion in this is in order to ensure for the proficiency and competency of fire department members, the fire department should conduct annual skills evaluations to verify that they retain their minimum professional qualifications. At the time of this incident, the department was not conducting annual proficiency training for fireground operations. You may remember early on we talked about the skills that the firefighters had, and that one of the things they did not do is they did not do annual refresher training on live fireground drills.
Yeah.
So, but busy departments will each shift may get to a few fires every year, but some of the departments I've been in, all the fires happened on C shift that year, or virtually all, and the other shifts or one shift never got anything, and that can happen, man. And
exactly.
And the percentage of fires, in the overall number of incidents is generally less than 10%. It's a low number,
it's
and
low.
it's getting drowned out by a lot of other stuff. Like, you're constantly doing CPR practices and first aid practices and going to those calls and so forth. And I know from my own experience that, as a firefighter, you tend to get twisted into thinking that your entire job is going to medical calls and or false alarms. And so you forget the basic reason that you're there, and you may lose that fluid functionality on the fundamental thing that only you can do, and that's fight fires.
And I used to tell people, and people would be a little shocked when I would say it, but I mean, the fire service is not there for the house fire, the car fire, the medical call, or whatever. It's there to manage the risk of your community catching on fire, like Maui or wherever, or Brandon a few years ago, where they had like 7 big fires in the downtown area on one windy day. That's really why there's an insurance rebate on your fire service, and we're there for the big emergencies. We do all the other stuff, and we tend to get focused on the car fire and the house fire and the garage fire, room and contents fire, but really we're there for the big ones. And the proficiency training, now I don't know if the investigators in this case just noted that they didn't do it and identified it in the report, or if they had some issues in their mind with how firefighters operated at the scene and they added it to the report. But either way, it needs to happen. And if you're on vacation when they do it, well, then you should be joining another shift to do yours. These are perishable skills. We have to keep doing it to make sure we're good at it.
You may remember the fundamentals, but you lose the muscle memory. You're not fluid with it. And you also lose the communications, the ability to talk about the important things and to note what to talk about and what not. And if you tend to forget, when the last time you fought a major fire was, well, that's an erosion of your skills. And like Paul says, it's not the house fire really that's the challenge. Why have you got a 1250 gallon a minute pump? Why have you got a 1,500 gallon a minute pump? What do you got 5-inch supply line for?
Right.
It's not for the 1-line trash can fire. It's not for the 2-line house fire. It's not for any of those things. And so if you get to an incident where you've got, your trucks working at capacity, well, then do you know the skills and everything that goes along with that type of an incident? Like if you haven't practiced it recently, you're going to be struggling a little bit.
I could take an electric vehicle shot here and say it's for the EV that catches on fire so you can drown it, but I guess that's not called for.
We didn't hear that.
Recommendation 16. Fire departments should establish a water supply group when the lack of water supply can affect firefighting operations. Discussions. As incidents dictate the need for additional water supply due to heavy volumes of fire, we had this huge 3-story building that was built in 1925. What did you think it was built out of? It's going to burn when it gets going. The incident commander must be able to forecast the need for additional water. Again, pre-plans, regardless of whether the incident is served by fire hydrants or requires a rural water supply. At this incident, the incident commander evacuated the structure and ordered a change to defensive operations. Defensive operations ordered Truck 5, Truck 12, Truck 6, Truck 3, and Truck 10, and several master streams on engines. Due to the lack of available water, the ladder pipes did not have enough water to be effective. Several pumpers were ordered to lay supply lines down various streets in order to establish an effective water supply. Also, a private hydrant across the street from the building on site Alpha was used to bolster the supply. This process took considerable amount of time to establish water supply that was needed for fire extinguishment. This is a big deal here in Lacombe where I live, and Doug would remember this if he's not on here later on in this podcast. But we have a college, an old college university that's built up on a hill and had its own water supply, and it always worried me. And we went up there. I held some really big drills in the summertime when the college wasn't being attended because they had these huge old buildings and stuff, and there was no water. Their water supply system was really old and was antiquated. So we set up drills and we had our mutual aid partners come on a Saturday or a long evening in the summertime. And we set up water shuttles at the same time as running, hydrants and stuff like that to practice these skills. And the first few were kind of rough because we'd never done that before. We had a high school catch on fire, the roof of our high school here in Lacombe. They were roofing and the tar pot exploded, and water was a problem, right? The sprinkler system was supplied, master streams and deck guns everywhere, and the whole water supply. And we ended up, laying lots of supply line. One of our local industrial partners came to help us, and we had 4-inch hose, they had 5-inch, and then we're all looking for adapters, and these kind of things need to be practiced so that we're proficient at it. Because without it, it's not going to work.
Yeah. So back to my comment earlier, if you've got trucks with big pumps on it and you can't get the water to the truck, you might as well save a lot of money and just put booster pumps on all your trucks because that's all the water you have.
Yeah,
So,
another department. I when I joined, I got to the department, and it was a city of 25,000 people in a heavily intensive industrial area. Lots of petrochemical, and all the primary feeder roads within the city. I had like 30 or 40 kilometers of roads with no hydrants. The way they developed it, they didn't put hydrants on the feeder roads. And so I said to the guys, like, well, what happens if you get a tanker truck on fire on that road? Well, we call the neighboring department. They bring a tender. And I go, okay, and the tender does what? Well, they just pump to us. How big's the pump on the tender? Why don't you have suction hose? You have a portable tank, and we didn't have suction hose. So the first thing I bought on that apartment was suction hose for all the trucks going, like, we might need this. We have to be prepared for emergencies.
yeah. I know in my last department, the entire city was built basically on 6-inch mains and
Yep.
50, 75, some cases probably 100-year-old mains. The original mains that, when the communities in that area were built, and a lot of that stuff was not too long after the turn of the 20th century. So, but luckily every, 5 or 6 blocks, there were major lines that fed all this grid system. And so I had one truck that had 1,500 feet of 5-inch on it. And the reason for that is this truck was able to lay in supply lines, several blocks if necessary to provide water. And this was, mostly for house fires.
Yeah, exactly. Because
Just
the 500 gallons wasn't enough.
Yeah, well, I mean, mind you, 3-story Victorians and 3-story apartment buildings and stuff. But we also had industrial estates too. We had one where we had a fire in a major industrial building, and it was 500,000 square foot building, and we relayed water. I think it was 5 blocks, 6 blocks, and put the fire out. Luckily,
Yeah.
But you got to be prepared for these things. You can make it up at the time, but but it's going to take a long time to get it in gear, basically. And if you're looking around for parts and pieces that you need, The building's
That's
going to burn down to the size of your water supply if you're not ready to deal with it.
Yeah, exactly. And I mean, it happens, right? Cities grow and things go on,
Yep.
and these little details get missed, and so that's why we're
Yeah.
doing the podcast. Now
Yeah.
we can actually stop slamming the poor city of Kansas City for
Yeah.
this fire here, and
Well, we're not. We're talking generalities here. So,
we are, yeah. So, but in the report, which is really unique for a NIOSH report, they have identified actions the department has taken since the incident.
which is good.
Yeah, so they undertook a number of actions to prevent the occurrence of a similar incident. The fire chief initiated a recovery process from all the ranks to review the incident, to develop recommendations, and to move the department forward. This is interesting. Phoenix did the same thing after the Brett Tarver death in the grocery store. Is they did a whole bunch of RIT training and found out. And actually, there's an article in a magazine. It's called "RIT is not rapid," and they did tests on RIT and what worked and what didn't work, which is where they changed the fire command
Yeah.
program after that. They did the same
Yeah.
thing, and Baltimore did the same thing after
Yeah.
theirs. So it's good that we're learning from these. That's why
Yeah.
we talk about them.
And the idea of a 2-man RIT team is really questionable.
Yeah, yeah. You said you were at an exercise recently that did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, doesn't work. Investigation committee was established to begin looking into several areas directly related to the fire and attempt to understand how such a tragic loss could occur. Recommendation number 1 was the fire department should develop a collapse zone policy. This policy should be developed using NFPA, NIOSH, and IFSTA and other industry recognized standards and recommendations as a reference, because that's what happened, right? Collapse zone is where these guys were killed.
Yeah. So these recommendations are coming out of the departmental review.
Right. Yes. Good point to clarify. Recommendation number 2, the department should update the department's current communication policies as they apply to emergency incidents. Currently, the department does not employ a uniform methodology as it applies to radio communication. So, firm up their policies there as far as what channels and emergency traffic and all that kind of
Standard
stuff.
phraseology, that kind of a thing.
Yep. Recommendation 3, the department should develop an inclusive training program that revolves around the merits of situational awareness. My friend Dr. Rich Gassaway was just here in Alberta, actually, at Lakeland College, giving 2 seminars on situational awareness. And if you ever get a chance, you need to take his class, or you can do it online too. He's got podcasts and books and all that kind of stuff. And the being situationally aware is so important.
Yeah, one of my soapboxes too.
Yep. Recommendation number 4, the department's current incident management system manual needs updating and to be included current practices and new standards. Number 5, train all department officers regarding the certification of a safety officer so that they know, if you're safety, don't go get embedded with one crew. You got to have that big picture, and you can have assistants. You can, all officers should have it, because we're all safety officers in real life.
Yeah, but part of the issue on safety officers is having enough experience and training to recognize incidents.
The danger.
So you can't be a probie or a new guy learning the job. You've got to be somebody who's got some scars, if I can put it that way.
Some gray hair.
Yeah, easy. But the other part of it too is as a safety officer, you got to understand, not your authority so much, but how you need to communicate that stuff. And people also need to, people who are incident commanders or sector commanders need to understand the role of the safety officer. And that, when the safety officer expresses a concern, that, that concern needs to be acted upon, not just, that's just Fred talking again. It needs to be more than that.
Exactly. Yeah. The next one was train all emergency personnel on building construction. So, going beyond the basic 4 hours you had at the recruit school 20 years ago, is we need to understand our buildings, and they are changing so rapidly. We have these old buildings, which is one thing. And then you have new buildings that might look like old buildings or might be new buildings, and they're built totally different.
Yeah. Francis Brannigan.
Yes. Yeah. Know your enemy. The building. Number 7, ensure all personnel properly wear all assigned personal protective equipment when required by policy. So I'm not sure where that one came from. There must have been some instances of improper use of PPE that they felt was something that needed to be addressed. So helmets, balaclavas, etc.
Gloves.
The Recommendation number 8, develop, train, and employ an incident accountability system for use in all emergency incidents. So it's exactly what we talked about. Number 9, fire department should consider preparing, training, and implementing new policies and procedures in a different format. So they must have found that their procedures and policies weren't being observed or followed, or even knew about them. So make it in a format that people can use.
So one of the goals is to try to keep them to a single page, or at least no more than 2 pages, right?
Yeah.
And having written lots of those, I'll tell you, that's damn difficult.
Yeah, exactly. I always tried to stay away from those because they're too hard to do. We need to review our policies. Hang on, I'm out. Yeah. Let's see. The department should develop policy that addresses the formation of an investigation team concept that's employed to all serious injury accidents. So you have to have a plan. We're in the fire service. These things are going to happen. We need to have a team and a plan that are trained and equipped to respond so that we handle these better, both for the injured people and all their other firefighters and the families and the community. We have to have a team. So that was a good thing.
Yeah, and it's not a witch hunt. Yeah, they're not
No.
looking for somebody to blame. I mean, when somebody gets hurt, obviously something went wrong. It might have been somebody did something they shouldn't have done. Maybe somebody forgot to do something, or somebody didn't do something well enough. But it may be also an outside factor, like how the department works in a certain situation, how their processes. Maybe it's a piece of equipment that's just not doing the job, or breaks, or is not reliable. It can be all kinds of things. But if you're like a cat and you just bury the dirt in the box, you're never going to get to the root cause, that you're feeding them the wrong kind of food. There needs to be something more than that.
Good analogy. That's interesting. Okay, I'll remember that one. Number 11, the department should develop and implement behavioral health training, referral, and education program that it also addresses peers counseling and suicide. So definitely every agency should have those, and we need to be able to talk to each other about stuff like this and provide counseling and have easy access to these tools.
Yeah. I don't know who it is that said that if you're in a department that's had an LODD, it says it's like nothing you've ever experienced.
Yeah.
It completely changes everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I've listened
And
to
it should.
It should, but it's really hard to do, and all the people that are there that were at the call and blaming themselves and stuff like that.
Yep.
The fellow from Charleston there, he goes around and gives talks. He's a doctor. He's written a couple books now.
Yeah.
He went and got his doctorate in psychology.
This is the super sofa fire.
Yeah, the super sofa fire. And
9 guys lost their lives.
Exactly what he said. He says it changes the department and everybody's attitude forever.
Yeah.
The next recommendation was review the current Mayday guidelines and update to include new communication considerations, prevention, and intervention. So making sure everybody's current on that so that we can respond appropriately when we have an emergency. That's what a Mayday is. Hey, I've broken my ankle, I'm out of air, I'm lost, whatever it happens to be. I'm having chest pain. We need to respond to those properly.
And don't feel intimidated or a failure if you do have to request help.
That's the big problem.
There are some guys who are taking their last breath and they'd never call a Mayday.
Exactly.
So
nope.
You need to
good.
Get cured of that culture.
We all have our Superman capes on under our shirt, right?
Yep.
Number 13, department recommend further develop leadership and foster management capabilities as part of an officer development program. These are critical things that we need to foster within our agencies.
Blue card, Paul?
Yep, blue card, yeah, and other officer stuff too, like
there's some good stuff, yeah.
1041 series, 1021 series, for example, is a good way to do it. The department should enhance its current building data collection methods that are utilized by emergency operations to facilitate high hazard risk identification with fire prevention records. So this was the same in Baltimore. This was the same in New York City. This is the same everywhere. Is we need to make sure we're collecting the data and we can have access to it at our fingertips, pre-plans.
So we noted earlier that, in fact, they had been to this site, this particular building, for 3 previous fires, I think it was, and multiple medical calls.
Right.
So the firefighters were in and out of this building relatively frequently. And, did they, when they were there, did they look at this building and say, if we have a serious fire here, I can see some risks here, or I don't see anything about this building. Find somebody who can tell me more.
Yeah, and I think Doug mentioned it in the first half of this episode. He had to leave here halfway through, but anyway, he mentioned, he says, know your hood, know your area, like your response district, and when you go to calls in the area, think about another situation. What if it was a fire? What if it was a flood? What if it was an explosion? What if it was a blizzard? I don't care,
Yeah.
whatever it is, but think about it in a different context, and so that you're building that slide deck within your memory.
Yeah. Game it out in your head.
Yep, game it out in your head. I like that. Yep, I'm a gamer, so I like that. Yeah, that's good. Okay, well, that wraps up this one here. Thank you, everyone, for listening to another emergency traffic podcast. Please tell a friend and share the knowledge. And as Sergeant Phil Esterhaus from Hill Street Blues used to say, let's be careful out there.
Take care every day.